Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, it's John from Heroes and Legends, and we are closing in on Ixalan previews coming to an end and getting the full set review this Friday. But we still have a couple more days of previews to go over, and we got some good ones to look at today. So I want to get started pretty quick here. Just a real fast reminder, if you enjoy what we do and want to help the channel out, there's a few ways to do so in the description below. You'll find our Patreon page linked down there. You'll also find some product links on Amazon. If you make any purchases on Amazon, once you go through any of those links, a percentage comes back to us. And then finally, Flipside Gaming has also provided a promo code for our viewers. They are currently doing pre-orders on Ixalan as well as Iconic Master, so check that out. With that being said, let's get into today's cards. And we're going to start off with some tokens. Now, Wizards went ahead and showed all the tokens, so I'm just going to show you these quickly. We get our Illusion token, you get your Plant token, and then you're going to get a token for each of the tribes. The Vampire Lifelink token, the Merfolk Hexproof token, Pirate has Menace, and of course the Dinosaur is Trample. And I'm a little disappointed in just one thing, and this is maybe a little off topic, but I just thought I'd bring it up quickly. We saw the Friday Night Magic promo tokens a few weeks ago now, and I assume they would have different art than the actual tokens. Now, the ones you get at Friday Night Magic are foil, and they're double-sided with a treasure token on the back, but I was really thinking the art would be different, and it's not. It's actually the same art. So, I don't know, a little disappointed. I mean, at least they are foil, and they are double-sided. They are unique, but I guess I was just expecting a little more. And finally, you get 4 different versions of treasure tokens, and they're actually themed with each of the tribes, which is pretty sweet. All right, let's get into the new cards for today. Jalis Collar. This one is going to cost a white. It's a human cleric. Common 0/3. Dinosaur spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So we get another way to expedite dinosaurs. We saw a 2 casting cost red card that was doing this about a week ago or so, and now we get a 1-drop white creature that's also doing this. Pretty sweet if you're thinking about Naya dinosaurs. Now, can Naya dinosaurs become a thing in Standard? Maybe. It's going to take a little brewing. I mean, the one thing I would caution you of if you're trying to figure it out is basically using cards like this in conjunction with the big dinosaurs is, in theory, just creating a ramp deck. One of the flaws ramp decks have had in the past, especially when it comes to competitive Standard, is the fact that sometimes they're inconsistent. There's times you draw all your big creatures and you don't get your ramp, or vice versa, and that can be awkward. So if there's a way to brew this deck and get the numbers right, and it works out that it can be competitive and hang, it's very possible that we see something in Standard, and I'm hoping we do, actually. I think that would be super sweet. So I want to see what people come up with when it comes to the actual numbers for the brew. Now, aside from that, is this a good card at Limited? Sure it is. Even if you don't have a lot of dinosaurs, just the extra value you're going to get from this card and casting them slightly early will be nice. And it helps you also gum up the ground and get your feet under you if you're dealing with some aggressive strategies. So that's fantastic for just 1 mana. This is a 1-drop I can certainly get behind for both Limited and maybe even Standard purposes. Also, in Commander, if you are going all in on dinosaurs, this is a good card to have as well. Desperate Castaways. This is a black and 1 human pirate. It's a common 2/3, can attack unless you control an artifact. Now, this is a common that's truly geared for limited play. You're going to see a number of cards that fit under that category today. This, just the first one, but it's a fine limited card in Draft or Sealed. Like, I'd be happy to play with this. A 2-drop 2/3. It can block, which is nice. It just can't attack necessarily unless I do some setup. Pirates, though, are going to be heavily into treasures. We're going to see some more cards that play well with treasures in just a few moments. So that's the low-hanging fruit here. I mean, granted, you can probably cast an artifact like an equipment or perhaps even a vehicle, and that would be cool. But you can simply also get a treasure chest, probably a lot easier. That will turn on the attack ability here. So, like I said, regardless, it's a nice card to defend you against, say, some aggro early creatures from your opponent, but at the same time, later on in the game, you should be able to attack with it, I think, relatively easily in most decks. Dire Fleet Hoarder. This is a black and 1 human pirate common 2/1. When this dies, you create a treasure artifact token. So I like cards like this in Limited. They're these little 2-drop 2/1s, and when they die, you get something out of them. And a treasure is good. It interacts with other cards. It can be used for color fixing. It can be used for ramp. There's plenty of decks. I'll be happy to run this. The 2-drop spot of your limited decks is a very essential, very important spot to look at. So you want to make sure it's pretty well stacked. And cards like this sometimes don't feel like they're overwhelmingly great, and there's maybe better 2-drops, but you'll be happy to play these a lot of the time. Raider's Wake. This is a black and 3 enchantment uncommon. When an opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. Raid at the beginning of your end step. If you attacked with a creature this turn, target opponent discards a card. This card for me is the anti-cycling card. Like, it exists to try to close off the last block, say goodbye to Amonkhet, and move on to the new block, and to ensure that that cycling deck doesn't show up and all of a sudden take over the meta or something like that. There were a lot of people with high hopes, actually, for the cycling deck when rotation was coming, because it was a okay deck in the past when it first premiered, but it just couldn't hang with a lot of the other stuff going on in the meta. Now with the big rotation, maybe it can hang. It didn't really lose any of the key elements. Now, this card shows up to run a little interference. If that deck does start to do well, expect this card to show up in standard sideboards to be an answer to that particular strategy. Now, if that doesn't happen, I don't really see this card seeing standard play because I think it's a little too expensive and conditional for what it's doing for a format like that. Aside from that, what about limited? It's an awkward card for me in limited too because it costs 4. Like, it's fine. Like, you could run this and sometimes it might even do some work for you. But I don't really see myself running this in a lot of my decks because at the 4 spot, I rather have like a creature or removal spell or something like that most of the time. This one just feels a little too high variance. It's not always going to pay off for me. It's definitely not good if I'm behind, and it's not going to help to stabilize or catch me up. So I think most of the time I'm just going with a creature unless I'm really desperate and I have a shallow sealed pool or something. Next we have Ruthless Knob. This is a black and 2 Orc Pirate. It's uncommon 3/2. Black and 2. Sacrifice a creature, create 2 colorless treasure tokens, and sacrifice 3 of those treasures to draw a card. Alright, if this was a 3/2 for 3 in your limited game, a lot of the times I'm running it anyway, even without reading the rest of the card. It's a nice curve filler. Sometimes it trades up. Fantastic stats for a 3-drop in those formats. Now, staple on the other abilities and the fact that this is also a pirate, card actually becomes pretty good for 3. I mean, first off, if you are all in on the whole treasure thing, which you might be if you drafted a whole bunch of pirates, then wonderful. Sometimes you can convert those into card draw. That's pretty good. And then you also get a sack outlet for 3 on here. And sack outlets are just always good and limited. Sometimes your creature's going to die anyway. It's a way to get some extra value out of it. In this case, maybe you're desperate for some color fixing or some ramp. You can sacrifice a creature to get there. Also, if you have a threaten effect, we saw one yesterday. Maybe there's another one in the set. Who knows? If that's the case, sack outlets, threaten effects, they go really well together. So there's a lot of upside for this card for 3 mana. It's actually a really good card for draft and sealed. As for standard, I think it's just a little too expensive, and that activation cost is a little too expensive for what it's doing. I mean, there could be a mechanized production deck in the format that uses that. Maybe Revel in Riches or something like that. Could be sort of a early meta deck. But even if there is, I don't know if this one makes it because I do think it's still a little too cost intensive and a little too conditional, having to have a creature to sacrifice to get the benefit out of it. Don't really necessarily see it there, but good for limited. Next we have Skullduggery. This is a black, instant, common. Until end of turn, target creature you control gets +1/+1, and target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1. I don't have too much to say about this one. This is a good combat trick for you in limited. It's not always going to make your cut. It's just 1 to cast. I like that in my combat tricks because sometimes the opponent won't play around combat tricks if you only have 1 mana up. So you could trick somebody with this and fool them. But it's going to be competing with creatures as well as removal spells. Typically, when I build my deck, especially for sealed even, I'll look at this and I'm going to say to myself, do I have enough removal spells? If I don't, then I'm going to probably run this and try to use it as a removal spell, and that can be just fine for you. But if you have a lot of more consistent removal, then maybe it doesn't make the cut. Swordpoint Diplomacy. A black and 2, it's a sorcery, it's rare. Reveal the top 3 cards of your library. For each of those cards, put that card into your hand unless any opponent pays 3 life, then exile the rest. So we've been looking at a lot of decent commons and uncommons today, so the rare must be great, right? Not so much. Okay, so this one is a little painful for me. I'm not a big fan, first off, of effects where your opponent gets to decide the outcome. Even if the outcomes are all bad for your opponent, they're still going to pick the thing that's the least bad, and that isn't always worth playing the card and having it in your deck. This is a perfect example of this. There's so many things that weaken this card that I can probably list them, but quickly, sorcery speed, I don't like that, but here's the one that's really bad. Reveal the top 3 cards of your library. So you have to reveal these cards. So your opponent knows, or your opponents, if you're playing Commander, they know what the cards are. So they make the decisions. They control this completely. Now, most of the time, this is going to simply be draw 2 lands and your opponent takes 3 damage, basically is what this card is in a nutshell. And that's not very good. Or if you're short on land, it will be the opposite. It will be exile the lands and your opponent will give you the big creatures. They're going to set up a situation that is not going to be great for you every single time. If you're already winning and you're well ahead, well, then yeah, it paints them into a corner. But you know what? I'd rather just probably pull a creature and just keep the pressure on them if that's the case. So yeah, this card, I don't see myself playing this in any format, quite honestly. This one just feels like a trap. It's too bad it's at rare. It just doesn't feel good to me. And yes, I'm sure you can come up with a scenario where it wins the game, but those scenarios are going to be very, very few and far between. This is usually going to be a waste of a card. It's not going to catch you up if you're behind. It's not going to help you in a board stall. It's simply going to help propel you if you're already winning by far. Brazen Buccaneers. This is a red and 3 human pirate, common 2/2 with haste. This enters battlefield. It explores. This is another decent card for limited. It is a little expensive on paper, a 2/2 for 4, but it does have haste, so it is like playing it on turn 3, kind of. And beyond that, sometimes it's a 3/3 with haste for 4. That's actually pretty good. Those are decent stats. And when it's not, you're still getting to explore. And I actually like the explore mechanic. I think it's pretty powerful for limited. So yeah, I'd be happy to run this in a lot of builds. Lightning Rig Crew. A red and 2, Goblin Pirate, uncommon 0/5. You can tap this. It will deal 1 damage to each opponent. Whenever you cast a pirate spell, untap it. Okay, let's get this out of the way first. Commander players out there, let me know in the comments below how you would take this card, create an endless loop, keep untapping it, and wipe out all your opponents. I'm sure there's many ways to do it. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Okay, let's talk about the card just generally now. 0/5 for 3, it's fine in limited. I mean, it's not doing enough for standard, but I'd be happy to play this in limited probably most of the time. Like a 0/5, even if I don't have many pirates, it's going to gum up the ground, slow things up. If for some reason I don't main deck it, if I'm up against an aggressive deck, then yeah, I'll pull it in, be happy with it. And the more pirates I have, the better it is. So yeah, it's a fine card. Rigging Runner. This one comes to us from a Chinese simplified language preview. It costs 1 red. It's a Goblin Pirate. First strike, 1/1. And it has raid when this enters battlefield. It will have a 1/1 counter put on it if you attacked with a creature this turn. Feels actually like a really good aggro card for me. It can be a 1/1 for striker, but maybe if you play it on turn 2 or turn 3 or just later in the game, it's a 2/2 for striker. Feels pretty decent. I would even want to try this in Ramanap Red and just see how it plays there. I feel like it could possibly make it into that deck in some quantity. And just generally good aggro card for limited. I'd be happy to pick this up in a draft, and it's good and sealed. Even if it's not an early pick, maybe a good middle of the pack pickup for you. Tilonalli's Night. This is a red and 1 human knight. It's a common 2/2. And when this attacks, if you control a dinosaur, it will get +1/+1 till end of turn. Fine limited card. It's a bear with upside, and I'm happy to play those pretty much all the time. You need those 2 drops like I mentioned earlier. This is a fine choice. When you have a dinosaur, Texan is a 3/3. That's actually pretty good for the 2 drop, but even if you don't, it's still a 2/2 for 2. It's just fine for limited. Field of Ruin. This comes to us from a German language preview. It's a land. You can tap it for colorless mana, or you can pay 2 tap and sacrifice. It will destroy target non-basic land an opponent controls. Each player searches his or her library for a basic land card, puts it onto the battlefield, then shuffles. Notice that it does not come into play tapped, it comes right into the battlefield. I think this is actually a great inclusion in the set for one main reason. It's a stopgap just in case any of these new transform lands just get out of control. Some of them look pretty good, so it's nice to know this exists. Will we ever need it? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. If we don't, I'm okay with it. I'm just happy that they thought ahead and printed it. Now, it's very possible this might show up in standard to deal with some of those lands if they start getting out of control. Maybe it will be out of sideboard some of the time, but this has the potential to see standard play as a defensive card in that regard. Aside from that, I feel the same way about it in Limited. I'm probably not main decking it if I'm concerned about my color consistency, but I would side it in that case to deal with a problematic land that my opponent might have. Now, a lot of times people say, well, why don't you just play it anyway? It's just a land. It can be one of your 17 lands. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes you can pull that off. Let's say you're playing a 2-color deck and your colors are pretty even. Yeah, you can get away with that. You could play 8 and 8 in this, and you're going to be just fine most of the time for your color requirements. But if you're going deeper, if you're trying to go 3 colors, even if it's just a splash, I want that color consistency most of the time in my limited game. So I would probably not main deck this in those cases, but bring it in a situation where I need it. If you need it, you need it. But if I can get away with not doing it, I'm going to try not to do it to hit my colors more consistently. So that's the way I think about those. Last thing I'll say about this card, I think it'd be good in Commander. Definitely a way to deal with some powerful non-basic lands in a pinch if you need to. With that being said, those are the cards for today. So it does feel like things are starting to wind down a little bit. We're getting into the commons and such now, which is pretty normal once you get to the end of the preview season. Now, tomorrow we'll do another preview video. I'll catch you up on everything that happens within the next 24 hours. And then on Friday, we'll begin our full set review. I'm actually pretty excited to see the full set. We'll start with white. We'll make our way through the weekend and into early next week. Hopefully get you ready for that pre-release. Until next time, though, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.